Hi everyone, my name is Monique. Welcome to Monique's Home, and today is going to be a little bit more substantial, I'm hoping, because I want to talk about something that has come to be a really huge realization for me when we moved here to Canada, when we moved here to Vancouver from Manila, and something that I'm really being very proactive and intentional as I raise my own children. And so today we're going to talk about how you can spot biases when you are choosing books for your kids. So if you follow me on Instagram at Monique's Home, you would have seen my last post, hopefully. And the latest one was about just the realization that when we moved here from Manila, in my mind, I was thinking, I went to school, I went to college, I even have my master's. I must be educated enough to be accepting of all and respectful to everyone. But when we moved here, I was increasingly becoming aware of my own biases. And it wasn't a really nice feeling to realize that I had a lot of negative thoughts, negative feelings, and I was just processing that in myself and thinking, well, biases are there, but what matters is what you do about those biases. And having, at that time when I thought about those things, I only had 2 kids, now I have 3. I thought I really have to be more intentional and proactive in raising my children to become more aware, more accepting, and respectful of other people. And even when they are faced with those biases, that they become aware of how their thoughts are, what their feelings are, and what they can do about them. So as I said in my post too, I always use books to introduce topics to my children, whether it be potty training, whether it be about having a new sister. When I was pregnant with Renee, I used a book to introduce that concept to Matina. And I think it's really such a great way to introduce topics and to start off not so easy conversations to have. Especially I think if you grew up in a more conservative country like I did. I don't know why I said that silly, but in a more conservative country like I did, a lot of topics are taboo. A lot of things are not so easy to talk about, especially with adults, especially with your parents. And I think, just having an entry point that is relatable to you and your child is really a great way to start off a not so easy conversation. So first thing to watch out for are stereotypes. So when you look through the book, try and see if certain groups are always depicted in a negative way, or let's say certain people are always in power. For example, if women are always shown to do certain jobs only or are only in supporting roles. So this book, Rosie Revere Engineer, I think is a good example of a book that tries to go beyond stereotypes. So normally, stereotypes would depict roles such as engineers or people who build machines, and things such as airplanes would be males. But in this book, it's her great aunt Rose who is shown here to be her inspiration, because great aunt Rose used to build airplanes. Something else to watch out for is tokenism. So that's when you routinely see only one group of individuals or people represented in a book. So when you're looking through a book, when you're choosing one for your child, try to see if different races are represented, or there are disabled children also in the book, and not only able children. So books now are a little bit more aware of these things and are a little bit more sensitive in making sure that most groups are represented in the story. So an example would be, for example, in this book, this is The Day You Begin. As you can see in this page, there are different kinds of children, different skin color, different hair color, and they might not look exactly like your child, but it's easy enough for your child to be able to find something that relates to him or her. Which brings me to the next one, which is checking to see if the story relates to your child. So not just the characters, but also what happens in the story is something that is real for your child, or something that he or she can relate to his or her experiences. So this point I think is really important because it has really a great effect on self-image, on your child's self-image. So when you think about it, the things that we see in movies, the things that we routinely see in books, we come to eventually think of them as important, as valuable. So if your child sees something in a book that is representative of himself or herself, or represents his or her family, then your child comes to think that, oh, I matter enough, I am valuable enough to be in this book, to be represented in this book. So for example, in this story, The Oldest Student, if this is a reality for you and your child, that you come together as a group to sing praise or to sing songs together, then your child will come to think that, oh, it's something that other people experience as well, because it's in a book. It's not just for myself, it's not just for my family, and oh look, I matter enough to be here, or that activity must be something that a lot of other people like doing too because it's in a book. Another very important thing to watch out for is invisibility. So it's not just what you see that's important, it's also very, very important to be mindful of what you don't see. So this is not only for one particular book, but it's a guideline to when you're choosing a whole array of books or you're putting together your child's library. So again, what we always see in movies and books and media, what's always represented is something that we come to think of as valuable and important. So what we do not see, what's not shown, what's not written about are things that are mind things, are, oh, they might not be important enough to be written about, or they're not valuable enough to be included in the story. So also include in your child's library books that may not be something that they normally see in their own community, but really something that they should be aware of. So this story, The Water Princess, is one of my favorites, really. So it tells stories of communities in Africa who would have to travel really far off places to get water. And personally, I really like the story because it helps me talk to my children about water conservation. And even if this is set in Africa, this is also a reality in the Philippines, and something that I think my children need to be aware about. So again, that's invisibility. So making sure that you have books also that represent things that are not normally seen in mainstream media. One more point to consider is the storyline. Are certain groups always depicted as weak? Are disabled people always shown as needing support and not able to help themselves? This book, Mama Zooms, is one of my all-time favorites. I've had this book since I was in college, and it's a really, really great story. So you can see here, Mama zooms with her child everywhere, and throughout the story you will see just how strong she is and how she's still able to do lots of things with her child. So in this book, it's a great representation of disabled people or differently abled people because they are shown here as strong. And when we also talk about choosing books without biases, you also have loaded words. So words that would label things negatively, or words such as fireman instead of saying firefighter. So you will see here, Mama has very strong arms from all our zooming. So really the words that were chosen here were meant to show that even if Mama is in a wheelchair, that she's still able to care for her child. She's still able to do things that maybe parents who are not in wheelchairs do with their own children. One last thing to look out for is the copyright date and the author. Now, I don't do this or watch out for this in all my book selections, but I think this is important to note when you're choosing books of certain topics. For example, if I want to talk to my girls about civil rights, human rights, or culture biases, then I think it's important to look at the author and see if they're credible and knowledgeable enough to write about these topics. So when we first moved to Canada, for example, I wanted them to read about First Nations and Indigenous people. So I looked for stories or books that were written by Indigenous writers, First Nations authors, so that I know that the information in the books are credible and that it perhaps even comes from their own experiences. So an example of this, a good example of this would be A Ride to Remember, which is what my Instagram post was about. This is a super, super good book. And the author is Sharon Langley, who the book is actually based on, or who the book is actually about, and also written by Amy Nathan, who, if you look at her biography, she really does write stories about human rights, civil rights, and women's rights. So she has the knowledge and the background in writing about these kinds of books. So as I said earlier, books really are a great way to start a conversation about things that you don't normally encounter on a day-to-day basis. But, if your family is not that into books, then there are other ways that you can help your children become aware of, their biases, to help your children become aware of what happens in their communities and other communities that they don't see firsthand, and to really have that respect not only for others, but also for themselves. And we perhaps can talk about that in another video, but for today, that's it. All the books that I showed you today are from our personal library, so we really do own them, we really do like them, and we read them. My kids read them again and again. So I will put links in the description box below in case you want to get your own copies. I encourage you to, books again are one of the greatest gifts that you can give your children. Thanks again for joining me. Please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to Monique's Home. I will see you next time, and remember to make every day your own version of extraordinary.